Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Draft Room. This is the NFL Draft Podcast of the Packernet Podcast Network. If you'd like to call in, if you'd like to participate in the NFL Draft discussion, please feel free to do so. The phone number here is 608-561-3243. We do have a call from Drew, so we'll get to that first, and then we'll plan on going through the rest of Kevin Cole's article, at least on the defensive side. But Drew, what's going on?
Hey Ryan, it's Drew from Green Bay, and I thought that the news that Kyler Murray is getting cut is really interesting. And the Cardinals, I think, only have the Jacoby Brissett and Slovis, could there be a possibility that Arizona now trades up to number 1 overall with Vegas? And from Vegas's perspective, obviously they would like a quarterback, but if they can trade back 2 spots and just give up on the quarterback this year and try to build up their team, and maybe they can get number 3 overall this year, a first next year, the second this year, a very high second this year from Arizona, that could go a long way. They could build their offensive line. They could get a stud pass rusher. I just think that would be very interesting. I think 3 is still a really good spot to be in this draft. Maybe they could trade down again a couple spots and target some of these linemen if they don't want to go the pass rush route. But I think that would be interesting for Vegas to do. And the other thing is in my opinion, there's only one quarterback to go, top 5. And I think Simpson's a first rounder, but not until later, middle of the first round or maybe a little after that. But if you don't like a pocket passer and you want a guy who's going to rush, then I don't think Mendoza's for you. And so maybe Vegas doesn't like his style. And if they don't, or maybe they just don't like him as a prospect, it just makes a very intriguing situation. I don't think it's a guarantee that Vegas takes Mendoza yet. So I think Mendoza, whatever happens, he will go number 1 overall though. So anyways, what do you think about that? Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, that's a good point about Mendoza at 1. If for whatever reason the Raiders decide we'd rather have the picks, obviously Tom Brady is there. Maybe he doesn't think that he's the guy, whatever the case may be. You have a bunch of QB needy teams that really want to get up there and are going to make that jump. Because if they don't, somebody else will. That's one of those things where they can go to the guy at number 2 and say, we're not taking a quarterback. Do you want to trade up and come get him? And it seems counterintuitive because it's like, well, if you're not, then I'll just sit here and take him at 2. The problem is the Cardinals will trade up from 3 to leapfrog them if they don't do it. But as far as the Cardinals are concerned, I mean, first and foremost, we got to see how free agency shakes out. There's a ton of talk about the Cardinals being sort of the top dogs for Malik. There are also a ton of other quarterback options. None of them are great, but, could they land Geno and that kind of fends off the need to do something crazy for Mendoza or Malik Willis or, Derek Carr could come back or something, I doubt he goes to Arizona, but I'm just saying. Once that's all settled, it obviously comes down to, is there any way whatsoever the Raiders come off of that first pick? Because that's what it all comes down to. That was the obvious realization I came to many, many years ago when I was trying to do mock drafts. Like when I first started doing it, it was so difficult because for every pick, you're not only looking at, who do they want to pick and what positions do they need, but I have to look at every single other team and say, okay, would it make sense for them to try to trade up here? And it dawned on me, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The only question that matters is, do I want to trade back? And if I don't, then everyone else can go shove it. I don't care if the Cardinals want to trade up to 1 to get a quarterback. Who cares? They can, wish in one hand, crap in the other, see which one gets filled first. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. The only question is, do I want to trade back? And so far, there's been zero reporting that the Raiders want to do anything other than draft Mendoza. And as long as that's the case, that will always remain the case, and it doesn't matter what anybody else wants or how badly they want it. So, Hopefully, there is some rumors about that for the sake of the drama, and also my deep need for us to not know what's going on in the draft, rather than knowing everything that's going on. But we'll see. And if you see anything in that regard, please send it to me. I haven't really seen anything yet, but I will definitely keep my ear to the ground on that. All right. So just as a recap, for those that maybe didn't tune in yesterday, I would encourage you to go back and do so. Kevin Cole over at Unexpected Points, he has a Substack, and one of the things he does every year is he looks at, let's see what he says here, applying modeling based on 15-plus years of combine data to the 2026 NFL draft class for defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs. So what he does is tries to look back over apparently 15 years to determine sort of the correlation between NFL value and drills at the combine. So how much does a three-cone for defensive tackles correlate to NFL value? The secondary thing that he tracks is how much there is a correlation between the combine events and how early you get drafted. Presumably, that would point to how much teams value these things. And so yesterday we looked at defensive tackle and edge rusher, and then today we'll start with linebacker. And I think this one will be a little bit, we'll do a little bit less investigation because, again, for linebacker, there is almost no correlation whatsoever in any way in regards to these drills and how much they correlate to NFL success. The only one, and again, these numbers are relatively arbitrary, at least from our point of view. Whether it is for Kevin or not, I don't know. But in terms of what the numbers mean. So, for example, there is an inverse correlation between weight and value. The correlation is at a -1, meaning there's a small correlation, but very, very small. On the flip side, there is a +8 correlation when it comes to weight for NFL draft position cost, meaning teams very, very much care about weight in a positive way. The bigger, the better kind of thing. Not necessarily. It's kind of hard to do straight correlation because obviously there's going to be a point at which it kind of horseshoes. You know what I mean? They don't want a 310-pound linebacker. Whatever. Beyond that, if you look at arm length, teams care at a 4, it's at like 0.1 for actual value. Same for 10-yard split. 40 is like a -0.1. Broad jump is like a 0.1. Vert is like a 0.3. Three-cone is like a 0.2. And then short shuttle is like a 0.1. I mean, there's just no value correlation whatsoever. Again, outside of a little bit weight in a negative way. But teams absolutely care at an 8 about weight, at a 4 about arm length, at a 2.5 for the 10-yard split, at nearly a 4 for the 40. Short shuttle is over a 4, and then over 1 for the vert. So they care a lot about a lot of things. And so the reason I'm not going to put a whole lot into it is because the value percentile means almost nothing. I mean, I can tell you that Kyle Lewis out of Pittsburgh did the best, but best at frickin' what? It doesn't mean anything. So if we instead look at draft profile, these are going to be the guys that teams like the most. You got Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese. Sonny Styles by a frickin' mile. Then Arvell Reese at 89th percentile, Sonny Styles 96th. Then it drops to Anthony Hill Jr. at 79th, Jack Kelly 71st, Trey Moore at 70th. So those are the ones that the teams would like the most. The biggest discrepancy, by the way, in other words, you probably shouldn't care as much, Arvell Reese is a big one. He's only at 51st percentile. Jack Kelly, instead of 71st, they have him at 44th. Trey Moore, instead of 70th, is at 38th. So this is just, in other words, how much overhyped they're going to be. Even Sonny Styles. Sonny Styles is at 96th percentile, meaning teams are obsessed with him. Kevin Cole puts him at 74th percentile. So just kind of like, It's funny, too, because if you actually look at the flip side of it, again, value percentile doesn't mean much, but look at how much teams don't like these guys. Kyle Lewis out of Pittsburgh, 97th percentile. For draft, how much teams like him, 23rd percentile. Justin Jefferson, 94th percentile. Teams, 22nd percentile. The other two big ones, Jacob Rodriguez at 84th percentile, teams 45th. Carson Scherer, 84th percentile compared to 41st percentile. So real big gaps there, largely because teams are seemingly very obsessed with metrics for linebackers that just don't really mean very much. Cornerback is nearly identical to that. In fact, it's not identical because teams don't care as much as they care about linebacker. The highest, remember, at linebacker, they care about weight at an 8. The biggest one is at under a 4, and that's arm length for corners, how much teams care. The other is 40-yard dash is at a 3. Between a 2 and a 3 is 3-cone and short shuttle, and then between a 1 and a 2 is weight and 10-yard split. As far as actual value, I don't think any of them are at even 0.5. The vert is maybe at like 0.3. And then weight, again, is negative. So again, there's not a ton here that points to value. So the draft percentile is the one that matters the most. Who are teams going to like the most? Number 1, Jalen Kilgore. First of all, he's 210 pounds. Not that teams care a ton about weight, but that's, they do care about being bigger is obviously going to be better. But also he has he has long arms. Not the longest, but it's up there, top 5-ish, top 3 perhaps. And that's the thing that apparently teams care about the most as far as correlation. So Jalen Kilgore is number 1 at 89th percentile, Trayden Stukes at 88th, and then Takario Davis at 84th percentile. Stukes actually is solid in both, 91st percentile for value. Otherwise, the biggest, a major discrepancy is actually Kilgore. That's number 1 for teams at 89th. It's 48th in terms of value. On the flip side, when you look at the value percentiles, the biggest ones are going to be Will Lee out of Texas A&M, Malik Muhammad, Charles Demings, and then Brandon Cisse. And Cisse is probably the biggest on the other side as far as underrated. Cisse is at 87th% from a value standpoint, 38th for teams. So they obviously are not going to be a fan of what he did at the Combine. From a value standpoint, again, it's minor, but he definitely checked all the boxes. The others would be Marcus Allen, 76th compared to 32nd, and Chandler Rivers, 75th compared to 27th. And then finally is safety. And this one actually does have some things that matter. One matters actually a decent amount, but teams care about a pile of other crap. So in terms of what teams care about, the biggest is the 40-yard dash at over a 4. Between a 3 and a 4 is arm length and weight in a positive way. And then between a 2 and a 3 is the short shuttle. Between a 1 and a 2 is a 3-cone. Otherwise, about 0.5 to 1 would be the broad jump and the vertical. So not as much. The only one that's actually over a 1 in terms of value is the short shuttle. It's at nearly a 2, and teams care more about that than they should, but it's actually relatively close. In other words, teams almost get that right. They're also very close on vertical. It just doesn't matter a ton. As far as weight, again, they care at a 3.5. It's at like a 0.1. Arm length, same thing. 40-yard dash, again, teams care a ton. It's over a 4, like a 4.1. It's maybe at like a 0.5 in terms of actual value. So this one actually does matter a little bit. From the draft percentile standpoint, the one that teams care about the most, the biggest is going to be VJ Payne at 95%. Then Lorenzo Styles at 91%. Then you've got Robert Spears Jennings, kind of a weird outlier here, at 89%. And then Dylan Thieneman at 86%. As far as value percentile, who actually checked the value boxes, Lorenzo Styles, number 1 at 89, Dylan Thieneman at 86, and Genesis Smith at 86. So the first two, Lorenzo and Dylan, there's agreement between the two, and understandably so. The somewhat disagreement would be Genesis Smith and VJ Payne, but not a ton. From a value standpoint, it's 86 compared to draft at 75. The other is almost the same. It's 73 compared to 95 for how much teams care. The only massive discrepancy is going to be Robert Spears Jennings. Teams have him at 89th percentile, and I don't mean to say that teams actually do. It's, understand what I'm saying here. From a value percentile, we're talking about 27th percentile. All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll talk about the offensive side of things tomorrow, but we got some other stuff to get to, so we'll take a break. We'll be right back. So as much as it is my hope that the draft coverage and all that is less and less about the very top, and in addition to that, I don't like when we start to figure out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 which guys go, because it makes the actual draft much less interesting. However, the first round is the major topic of discussion, and people are going to try to figure out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in doing so, I want to kind of track along with where we're at on that. There's actually considerable buzz going around after the Mike Sando article over at The Athletic. Executives mock the NFL's top 10. Jets go boomer bust at 2, Chiefs nab a running back. As far as what executives, he says, I've used insights from 4 of them, 1 general manager, 2 assistant GMs, and 1 vice president of player personnel to project the top 10 picks of the 2026 NFL Draft. Last year in this exercise, executives correctly predicted 5 of the first 9 selections. Biggest whiff was Shedeur Sanders to the Cleveland Browns at 2. And so the way that these 4 executives had this shaking out, and we'll get into the kind of nuance of it in a second here, but I'll just go through the top 10 first of all. Raiders, Mendoza, that's kind of assumed. Jets, Arvell Reese, that one is becoming tentative, but still holding strong. Cardinals, edge rusher David Bailey. Titans, wide receiver Carnell Tate. Giants, offensive tackle Francis Mauigoa. Browns, offensive tackle Spencer Fano. Commanders, edge rusher Ruben Bain. Saints, receiver Mekhi Lemon. Chiefs, running back Jeremiah Love. Bengals, defensive tackle Peter Woods. So on a pick-by-pick basis, and Tennessee is actually one of the things that stirred up the most discussion here, but on a pick-by-pick basis, they kind of go through and he gives some of the quotes that he got about them. Again, Mendoza seems the most straightforward, but fortunately they do sow a little bit of doubt, which I love. Unless they can trade out, one said, it's amazing he's the first pick in the draft. That is an important thing to keep in mind, is sort of the consensus that this is not, well, I shouldn't say consensus, because there have been a lot of talks about, no, he's actually elite. There is a broad feeling, I'll say, that he certainly is not the kind of elite number 1 prospect that you'd like to be sitting at 1. On whether or not the Raiders would move back, the quote was, I'm not sure there's a player to trade up to get. The Raiders' new coach, Clint Kubiak, will install a run-oriented offense that requires less from the position. Mendoza isn't seen as a generational talent. For those reasons, we might use pencil to write in this projection. I think everyone just assumes they go that way, the executive added. Tom Brady says, I love everything about his game on Fox NFL Sunday in mid-December before his team had secured the top pick. The traits Brady said he respected in Mendoza were traits Brady possessed as well: leadership, relatability to teammates, overcoming challenges, turning around a program that had not won at the highest level previously. I don't think he's surefire at all. A veteran offensive coach who studied all the quarterbacks in this draft said, I like the Alabama guy. This also is one of the things, and they haven't done it yet, but I'm sure it's coming relatively soon, over at Tyler Dunn's Substack. I can never remember the guy's name, but go figure, right? He has articles come out where they discuss different prospects, and he kind of ranks them and then goes through them. The disparity between these scouts that he talks to is shocking. And it really just goes to show how inexact of a science this was. If it was a science, pretty much everybody would come to the same conclusions. And you have scouts talking about this is a generational talent, and by the time you get to Scout 4, usually it's kind of in order. Scout 1 likes him the most, then 2, then 3, and Scout 4 just hates him. He's just the biggest pile of crap loser. I've never seen such a piece of crap in my life. It's like, what, bro? So it doesn't surprise me. And this is from the scouting level, low level, to apparently the high levels, because these are higher up executives. You got guys coming out going, he's not really number one. I like the Alabama guy better. Okay. As for the Jets with Arvell Reese, one executive says, I don't see them passing up a freakish athlete. When asked about Bailey, he said, Bailey is not deficient as an athlete at all, but Reese is a special athlete. Reese also feels like a little boomer bust. That seems like a Jets pick. Yeah. Another executive said he thought Reese, who played off the ball and on the edge for the Buckeyes, but said last week he views himself as an edge defender, would become the next Micah Parsons. That's a chopped up sentence. He's a traits guy who will become a consensus top edge rusher, another executive said. You have to have a defensive head coach, like Aaron Glenn. They will think they can use him in multiple spots. Very similar to the guy the Giants took last year in Carter. Reese is all about boomer bust to me, an executive who did not vote in this survey said. He may be great, but he may not make it at all. He doesn't seem to process the game as fast. For the record, there's a little chart here that shows how everybody voted, executive 1, 2, 3, and 4. It was unanimous for Mendoza. Executives 1, 2, and 3 said Reese. Number 4 said Bailey. Then at 3, Arizona Cardinals. David Bailey edged Texas Tech. Cardinals loaded up on defense in the draft and free agency last year, but it was difficult to tell, partly because of injuries. One executive said they need help up front because they cannot generate pressure even after they spent in free agency. Bailey could help address that deficiency. He's really just a designated pass rusher who's kind of soft at the point of attack, another executive said. The implication being number 3 could be early for such a player. Another executive initially had the Cardinals drafting receiver Carnell Tate, who would give Arizona a downfield dimension that the 2025 first-round Marvin Harrison Jr. might not. The exec later changed his selection to Bailey. That one was also unanimous, with the first 3 saying Bailey, and then number 4, who picked Bailey at 2, had Reese going there. So all 3 of them have Mendoza, Reese, and Bailey gone at this point. 4 for Tennessee is where it gets interesting. So Carnell Tate is the pick. However, for some reason, he should have picked 5 or 3 or something to make a tiebreaker. This was a tie. Tate being 2, the other one was Falk, which is very weird that 2 executives both had Falk going here at 4. I mean, it's not just that 2 of them thought he was a top 10 guy. 2 of them thought Tennessee will be drafting Falk. That's Keldrick Falk, edge rusher out of Auburn. And the other 2 executives did not have him top 10. So very, very weird. A lot of people are just, those 2 are stupid. They're stupid. They're stupid. Yeah, they might be stupid, but I think there's something to look at here beyond just they're stupid. That's pretty wild to me. Let's see. Tennessee Titans, Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. 2 execs still had the Titans selecting Tate here. The other 2 had them taking Auburn defensive lineman Keldrick Falk. I went with Tate over Falk after consulting a 5th executive who said he didn't see Falk as a first-round talent. See what I mean? Is he a top 5 guy? Is he like a middle of the first-round guy, or is he a second-round guy? Depends who you ask. The executive said he's too big, long, and versatile with good character not to go in the top 10. That's what one of the executives said who slotted Falk to the Titans. Tate is good, another exec said. He's like A.J. Green, but more of a deep ball threat, probably. They need receivers, I know that, another executive said. Daboll will want an offensive player. They took Neighbors when he was with the Giants. That guy in this draft is Jordan Tyson. At 5, they went with Maui Noah. 3 out of the 4 executives went with Maui Noah. Executive 3 went with Malachi Lemon. Sorry, Makai Lemon. I was like, why did that sound weird? Malachi Lemon. It says it would be a very logical way to go in John Harbaugh's first draft with the team. The one exec projecting a receiver to the Giants cast a dissenting vote. He said they need weapons for the quarterback. The other guy, Neighbors, is hurt. They're probably going to lose the Kentucky slot, Wan'Dale Robinson, in free agency. An exec who questioned New England's selection of left tackle Will Campbell at number 4 last year thought the offensive tackle atop this draft class were a safer pick. The New England guy was limited physically, the exec said. These guys, Mauigoa and Fano, are not. At 6, the consensus was Fano. However, there really was no consensus. There were 4 different picks here. Exec 1 had Downs. Exec 2 had Fano. 3 had Mauigoa. 4 had Freeling. So I love that by the time we get to 6, everyone's like, I don't have a freaking clue. Execs had 3 different offensive linemen landing in this slot. All 5 of the Browns' primary starting offensive linemen from 2025, along with a few reserves, are set to hit free agency. They need O-line bad, one exec said. Is there one worthy of the 6th pick? No, the exec said, but I'll still stick one there. Georgia's Monroe Freeling was his choice, joining Mauigoa and Fano as projections for the Browns. None of the other execs had Freeling in the top 10, while 2 had Fano at number 10. Fano is the next best tackle after Mauigoa is gone, another exec said. Can play guard and tackle, very good analytics, which Cleveland will value. One executive said they'll take whoever they value as the best tackle in the class or the best tackle available. All right, why don't we take a break here? I want to go through the rest of these, but also pull up a couple different things about what people are saying about the top 5, top 10 conversation. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, at 7, the consensus among the executives was Ruben Bain, which is funny because actually 2 executives had Carnell Tate. The only reason he can't go there is because he's already gone, which leaves Sonny Styles for executive 1 and Ruben Bain for executive 3, and he decided to go with Ruben Bain. He says 2 of the 4 execs had Tate landing here, but they're already off the board in this exercise. Bain and inside linebacker Sonny Styles were the other projected picks. Quote, I could see Bain going as high as 2 to the Jets, one executive said. He reminds me of Terrell Suggs, someone who can bring that play style to your defense, a heavy-handed, old-school player who's the most physical of the edge guys. As for Styles, there was a lot of mixed opinions. Quote, Styles is an inside backer, a will, not a rusher like Reese, one said. Another countered that Styles projects as a pass rusher at 6'4", 244. Commanders coach Dan Quinn has a history of taking rushers, another executive said. He coached Dante Fowler at Florida, signed him in Atlanta. He drafted Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley in the first round, also with the Falcons. I could see him taking a rusher. A lot of those guys, by the way, are sort of the more 250-pound speed guys as opposed to some of the bigger types. At 8, Mekhi Lemon is the pick, although, again, you have 4 different selections among the 4 different executives. 3 of the 4 execs had the Saints drafting a running back or receiver, but there was no consensus that Lemon would be the pick. Quote, I'm hearing whiteout on them, the exec slotting Tyson to New Orleans said. All the execs had Tate gone by this point. Some see him as a smooth slot receiver in the mold of current Saints receiver Chris Olave, whose future with the team is in question entering the final year of his rookie contract. Lemon is a very explosive receiver, the exec slotting him to the Saints said, but they could go anywhere. I think they could go Jeremiah Love over Lemon depending on what they do in free agency. Then at 9, for the Chiefs, not surprisingly, Jeremiah Love goes here. I can't really see him falling past the Chiefs, if nothing else. This would have to be, in fact, 3 of the 4 had Jeremiah Love going here, with Ruben Bain being the only other for executive 1. Presumably you can't let him continue to fall here. Quote, they need a back, and they need to run the ball until their quarterback is full ready, one of the execs projecting Loves to the Chiefs said. The serious knee injury Pat Mahomes suffered in December highlights the risk associated with the quarterback carrying so much of the offense. The Chiefs' running game lacked explosion last year, and Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco... my brain is slipping. Isaiah Pacheco are both hitting free agency. They need wideout too, another executive said. Bain addition to the defense was the outlier pick. Then finally at 10, they went with Peter Woods, the defensive tackle out of Clemson. However, again, you end up with a situation where there was 2 picking Fano, who was gone, 1 taking Bain, which was executive 2, and then kind of just process of elimination leaves Woods with the final option. Execs see Cincinnati as a team torn between protecting Joe Burrow and fortifying a struggling defense. They have to go O-line, please, for all of us, one executive said. I feel like we all feel that way. With Fano gone in this scenario, the choice might come down to Freeling, the offensive tackle at Georgia, or whatever front seven defender is highest on the Bengals board. Woods is a really good player, one of the execs said. I would say the Bengals are taking someone like him or Sonny Styles, the inside backer. I think there's some upside there. I think maybe a different way to do this, and I know it's probably hard to take this much of an executive's time, but I think if you had told executives 1, 2, and 3 that all those picks are gone, what would you do with it? I think they would probably go in a different direction, and Peter Woods would not have been the selection, potentially at least. Monroe Freeling very likely could have been the pick, but whatever. So there is sort of a top 10 NFL mock draft done by NFL executives, and it's interesting because executives you would think are the ultimate insiders, but man, you listen to them talk, not to mention the opinions that they hold and the way that they reason through things, you can kind of tell they really don't. I don't want to say they don't know what they're talking about because I don't want to just be too condescending or anything, but they're really just flinging stuff around out there. There's no real concrete thing, and I think fans do this to a fault, where we all just know everything. We just know we know all the things. We don't know anything. We just pretend we do. These guys don't pretend. They just sling crap around, and they don't care what the consensus says. They don't care what the media says. They don't care what other executives or other teams say. They are very firm in their opinions, but their opinions are all over the frickin' place. Then if we take a look over at Connor Rogers over at CBS or NBC Sports, he has a couple of thoughts as well. It starts off by talking about the number 1 pick is essentially locked in, which brings us to number 2. His thoughts on the situation. The first clue was the hiring of Carl Dunbar to coach the defensive line, most likely hinting at an increase in 3-4 usage up front. Then at the Combine, they traded Jermaine Johnson to the Titans for defensive tackle Tavondre Sweat, a clear scheme fit swap. Feels like the field has narrowed for the pick, and I'd consider Arvell Reese the favorite. David Bailey and Sonny Styles will most likely be in the conversation as well. Then it talks about while Malik Willis has been tied to Miami's new regime, Arizona has more cap flexibility to sign him as their starter. There was plenty of buzz at Indy connecting the two in upcoming free agency. The Cardinals are strong at pass catcher, but they might look to create a dynamic backfield this offseason. Speaking of that, moving on to the next note, Jeremiah Love has been a popular name connected to the 7th through the 9th picks, Commanders, Saints, and Chiefs. He then says, I'm not confident he makes it to that range anymore. The Titans and Giants have second-year quarterbacks that need help. As for Arizona, new head coach Mike LaFleur has worked with Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Sean McVay for multiple seasons. He has seen firsthand how a run game and utilizing backs in the pass game can be an engine to a football team. If Love doesn't make it to Tennessee's pick or they pass on him, Robert Saleh always bangs the table for more pass rushers wherever he goes. Trading for Jermaine Johnson is just the start, but this is the defense that runs on the front four getting home. At pick 4, the tiers of players would be Reese, Bailey, and Ruben Bain. At 35th overall, that group could include Cassius Howell, R. Mason Thomas, Gabe Akis, and Zion Young. Then he says, if there's one team at the top of this draft that isn't tying themselves in knots over positional value, it's John Harbaugh's New York Giants. That means Love, Sonny Styles, and Caleb Downs are front runners for the 5th overall pick. Retaining Jermaine Illuminor in free agency will be very important for the offensive line and draft flexibility. So there you go, some things to keep an eye on. I got to get out of here. You all have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.